Good people don't smoke marijuana.
I've known Larry for a long time.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
I've known Larry for a long time.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana for you and me. Ah, yeah, the medical marijuana. Whoa, 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 ah, yeah, the medical. It's the medical marijuana show. You knew we know.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This one is for Saturday, the 22nd of September 2018. I'm your host, Larry Love. We're here every week to bring you the latest information on the medical uses of cannabis and the struggle for that and the struggle to legalize for adult use. This week, I'm really happy to have author and High Times senior grow editor Danko on. He's got a new book out on beginning growing, and we're going to have a great conversation with him in the second half of the show. But as always, I've got news for you. And first up, we're waiting for an announcement, even possibly this weekend, on the scheduling of hemp and cannabis and CBD and stuff. But here is the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, discussing the FDA's investigation on cannabis, and this was on CNBC this week. Here's this.
We've evaluated some of the active ingredients in marijuana, some of the components, and we've approved drugs based on that. We've approved one drug that's a synthetic derivative of marijuana for various treatments, including for anti-nausea treatments for patients with cancer who are getting chemotherapy. We recently approved a drug called Epidiolex, which is a naturally derived substance. It's a CBD substance derived from marijuana for the treatment of 2 rare seizure disorders in pediatric patients. So there is a pathway for evaluating the active ingredients in marijuana as safe and effective drugs, and that pathway is open to companies that do proper research. I will tell you, as a physician, the idea of using botanical marijuana as a way to deliver an active pharmaceutical ingredient doesn't seem exceedingly efficient. We don't tell a lot of patients to inhale active ingredients as a way to deliver drugs. It's not typically an efficient way to deliver a drug. You know, I don't tell my patients who are on hypertension medication to go home, crush it up, roll it in a piece of paper, and smoke it as a way to deliver it. So the idea of botanical marijuana as a therapeutic alternative that would go through a proper regulatory process, it's not out of the question. The door is open to people who want to do that kind of research, but it's typically not the way that you'd want to deliver an active pharmaceutical ingredient.
What about using pot just recreationally? Do you have any concerns about that, or is this stuff overhyped?
Well, look, I think as a public health official, as a physician, sure, I have concerns around it. I have concerns around continued inhalation of a product that has constituents in it that are harmful to the lungs. There's no question that there are constituents in the combustion that are probably harmful to the lungs, especially if you're a repeated user. And we know that there are long-term effects from repeated marijuana use, particularly in developing brains. There is research that demonstrates that. So we do have concerns. We have a regulatory process that's been open for business. We have worked very closely with manufacturers. We have at least 20 investigational new drug applications that are in-house, that are active with people who are trying to investigate components of marijuana for approval of FDA-approved products. So there is a proper pathway for doing the science to demonstrate these uses, and that's where I would encourage sponsors to try to make their investments and spend their time.
It's impossible to compare it to alcohol, too. I don't know how many things I'd have to figure out for alcohol and the effects, whether it's, drunk driving, whether it's cirrhosis of the liver, whether it's alcoholism, which affects domestically and family. I don't know how you'd ever come up with a sum total for societal negatives of pot versus alcohol, but I don't think, do you think just without looking into it that pot is not as bad, the same, or worse than what alcohol does to society.
Well, I think the use patterns are very different, and so I think it's hard to make comparisons
That's what I
between
mean. It's
alcohol
almost
and marijuana.
impossible, but I can't. That's the argument that you're going to hear, though, and it's already abundantly available everywhere else, so I guess it should be regulated and taxed.
And look, recreational use of alcohol, which is a legal substance, versus marijuana, they're having very different effects on people's behavior. Use patterns are different. They do different kinds of harm. So I think I don't think it's appropriate from a clinical standpoint to try to make a comparison and say
but
one's
I'm just
safer
trying to
than
figure
the
it out,
other.
because that's the knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, look at the harmful. And we went through prohibition, and we
It's
see
one of
how
the
that
arguments.
worked out.
Yeah, it's one of the arguments that you hear.
But then I don't think, you shouldn't be taxing cocaine and heroin and legalizing that because it's already available, obviously. So I don't know. This has been going on. This argument's 50 years old at least.
There's a difference between decriminalization and legalization. There's a very big difference, right? So we could decriminalize the use of certain substances and the possession of certain substances and not move towards legalization and promotion.
Now we're in criminal justice reform, which needs to be done,
but then there's an age issue, because if you look at some of the research, and Dr. Gottlieb, I think we've talked about this, the idea that kids who smoke marijuana are much more at risk in terms of what it can actually do to the brain.
Well, that's what he said, the developing brain.
No, I know, but then the question is, would you ever think about it from an age perspective, meaning it should be legal if you're over a certain age?
What would the age be? I was going to say, instead of 18, is it 25? When do you have a developing brain or when is a brain developed enough that you wouldn't have the same concerns?
It depends on the person, I suppose, but obviously once you've gotten out of your teenage years, you're no longer have a developing brain. So we're talking about people who are teenagers, adolescents. But that's not the only reason to be concerned around long-term use of the substance. And like I said, from my standpoint, I sit in a position where we try to create proper science around the use of active ingredients that are being used for medicinal purposes, or even for mood alteration. Obviously, there's a lot of drugs approved to affect behavior and in some cases performance as well. And so we have a scientific process for that.
So, he's obviously taking, the hard line about as far as ingesting via smoke is concerned. But we all know from our studies and other studies that are actually written out there that smoking cannabis, whether it's vaping or combusting it, does not cause lung cancer, as far as they know right now. Also, it improves lung function and lung volume. So there is a place for smoking cannabis, and people have been doing it for thousands of years. So let's not forget that. Now, while this is all happening, that's the FDA guy. Representative Matt Gaetz, G-A-E-T-Z, I think he's from Florida, rips the DEA deal with a Canadian company, which is called Tilray, where they are actually producing canna capsules that are going to be sent to a study in the United States. Here's this by Andrew Blake at the Washington Times. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency decision to import marijuana extracts from Canada has fired up Representative Matt Gaetz, Florida Republican, in light of the Justice Department causing obstacles for the U.S. cannabis industry. Gaetz took on Twitter the other day, Wednesday, in response to a report that said the Justice Department had approved to import cannabis compounds from a Canadian company called Tilray Inc. To be used in a research study conducted at the University of California in San Diego. Reacting in a tweet, the congressman accused Attorney General Jeff Sessions of ignoring dozens of U.S.-based applicants that have unsuccessfully sought permission to grow research-grade marijuana for the government. Unbelievable, tweeted Matt Gaetz, a member of the House Armed Services Budget and Judiciary Committee. DEA gives approval to import cannabis compounds from Canada, while the AG is sitting on 24 applications from domestic manufacturers. So, what happened to Buy American? People have been making great canna caps and growing great cannabis in this country for years, and it's kind of odd that they went to Canada for this. More on this story as it breaks out. Of course, Tilray went crazy at the beginning of the week. People made a lot of money, then they sold it off, and I think was down to about $123 after being up to close to $300 or at least earlier in the week. So we got to keep our eye on that. With that being said, Coca-Cola is thinking about moving into the cannabis-infused drink business. And, of course, the schedule's going to have to change if big soda is going to come into the market, so to speak.
Coca-Cola is considering getting into the market for cannabis-infused drinks. In a statement Monday, Coke said it is closely watching the growth of CBD, which does not produce a high and has been used for medical purposes like easing inflammation as well as nausea. Coke said no decisions have been made. Matt Uris for CBS 13 News.
Okay, so obviously this was going to happen for sure, and the drink industry is huge. But at the same time, there's negative stuff happening for some reason, and we're going to listen to this just right now. In Denver, they're getting more restrictive with some of the products that are being made with cannabis, and suppositories and other products may be banned. Believe it, suppositories, which are a really good ingestion method for sick people. Here's this.
Investigator Rick Salinger joins us live from a marijuana dispensary. And Rick, what may be banned?
That's an invasion of privacy. Well, Jim, we're talking about items that go into your body through alternate means, through the nose and, let's just say, through the backside. If you walk into a dispensary to buy pot, you're going to find some items that might surprise you. These are marijuana-laced suppositories. So this is to get high?
Yes. To get high and to have pain relief.
Regulating marijuana sales is not just about the pot used for smoking. Edibles required new scrutiny and rulemaking. Now representatives from the marijuana industry met with state health officials and others to determine how to deal with those items like those suppositories. The head of the Department of Revenue, Michael Hartman, says the current draft of rules would ban such items.
The way that the product is absorbed into the body, it presents a heightened risk for infection.
The distinctions may be hard for marijuana buyers to discern. For example, this marijuana inhaler used through the mouth is okay under the proposed changes.
But instead of having the albuterol in there, it's going to be made with THC.
But an inhaler through the nose would not be allowed. Rachel O'Brien with the group Smart Colorado wants strict regulation.
We think these products need to come off the recreational adult use market, whose main intent is to get high.
Getting high on pot is taking new forms. The test now for regulators is to keep up with it. Christy Kelly, the head of the marijuana industry group, says the items that are already in the store should be allowed to remain there for the health of both the medical and recreational users. Live in Denver, Rick Salinger, covering Colorado First.
So this is exactly what I've been talking about, why we have to separate the recreational industry from the medical industry. I've been talking about this and to people. There's a few people that have responded with me, but it has to be separated, or else things like this is going to happen. They're going to get rid of medical uses of cannabis in, for the recreational shops. I mean, I understand separating it, but the way it's working right now in some states is the medical programs are disappearing, and they say, well, they can just go get their pot from the recreational store. No, that's not what it's going to be. We need to separate it in every state, and I want people to start proliferating that, if you agree with me, for sure. We're going to go around to a couple more states. That was Colorado. A Republican candidate for Kansas governor, Chris Kobach. Listen to what happened to him. Obviously, I said he was a Republican when he says that he's not on board with medical or recreational. Listen to the crowd. This is how you got to fight back to these people that are trying to kick us down.
Unfortunately, medical science has already developed a way to get the beneficial effects of marijuana, the CBD, in pill form. And the FDA is on the verge of approving a CBD pill. So those who claim, oh, we still need to legalize medical marijuana, are actually going down the path of California, like they usually do. California legalized medical marijuana first, and it was a joke. It just became a gateway for recreational marijuana. We do not need to legalize marijuana, and we will not legalize marijuana on my administration. Go eat some Doritos. Come on.
Wow. I mean, that's what to do. We got to go to these rallies where these anti-cannabis people are, and we got to tell them to look at the science, embrace the science. Oh, wait a minute. Republicans don't do that. Oh, well. We got to yell and scream and make sure that they don't win. Get out and vote. That is the important thing. Here's another one. Here is in Kentucky, our old friend Kevin Sabret should go back to making hot dogs and stop this insanity. Here he is in Kentucky trying to get lawmakers not to legalize cannabis.
A national drug policy expert is urging Kentucky lawmakers to slow down the push to legalize medical marijuana.
WDRB's Lawrence Smith explains the concerns and why some are calling them a smokescreen. Lawrence?
Well, for weeks now, lawmakers have been hearing from supporters of medical marijuana. Today, the other side tried to snuff out the marijuana momentum.
I think we need to slow down a little bit because I do think this is something we're going to regret.
That sobering message from Dr. Kevin Sabet, director of the National Drug Policy Institute. Sabet telling lawmakers there's no evidence that smoking marijuana is good medicine.
And we think that science, not politics, should determine medicine.
And according to Sabet, the science says some components of the marijuana plant could have benefits, but others could be dangerous.
We don't smoke medicine, first of all, obviously.
Sabet debunking some of what he calls the wild claims made by marijuana advocates, including curing cancer.
The evidence shows that nausea related to chemotherapy, there could be some relief, and we need to look at that. But when it comes to whole cancer, this is, I think, very problematic.
But Senator Dan Syme, who admits to having used marijuana for his cancer symptoms, says legalization will help ensure a safer product.
I just think that we would have access to clean products rather than getting it off the street.
Other lawmakers say they need hard evidence.
I believe that it's research and science and not a collection of anecdotes.
But supporters say they don't believe Sabet's testimony hurts their chances of passing a medical marijuana bill next year.
Nothing new was presented. The information, some of it I think was just old smokescreen type of behavior.
But clearly some lawmakers who admit they're on the fence are looking for answers.
Should a state legalize marijuana or not?
My position is unequivocally that we should not legalize marijuana.
So, Lawrence, what does the doctor say to those people who are seriously ill and believe smoking marijuana helps them?
Well, Sabet says states might consider allowing marijuana for those who have just a short time to live, but he says that's much different than the widespread commercialization of marijuana.
Unbelievable. This guy just keeps, he's fighting a losing battle. I don't know whose money he's spending, this Kevin Sabret. Or Sabet. Anyway, he's fighting a losing battle, and we have to keep fighting against people like him. In Louisiana, the Board of Medical Examiners votes in favor of lifting some restrictions. They had a restriction in Louisiana where a physician could only sign up 100 people to the medical cannabis program that they have there. So that's outrageous. I mean, there's so many people that live there that would be left out. So here's this report.
The Louisiana Board of Medical Examiners met Monday morning to decide on changing the rules for medical marijuana patients.
Right now, as it stands, there's a 100 patient limit, but we're considering whether we should increase that limit or even have a limit at all.
After listening to a number of speakers voice their concerns about the cap, the board voted 8-1 in favor of eliminating the restriction.
I'm entitled to this, and limitations that are placed on me that get in the way of my statutorily granted rights, that get in the way of my constitutionally granted relationship between myself and my physician.
I registered my first 100 patients within 2 weeks of opening my clinic. I currently have a waiting list of over 700 patients. I absolutely do believe that the 100 patient limit is stifling patient access to this program.
In a tighter passage, board members voted 5-4 in eliminating the rule that patients would have to return to their doctor every 90 days to continue receiving recommendations for medical marijuana.
I would actually go as far as to say I'm going to be one of the hardest working people with cerebral palsy that you might meet in your lifetime. I work a lot, and it's inconvenient for me just as a young professional to be mandated to go in every 90 days.
We do recognize that it's important for physicians and patients to have a relationship where they can determine how frequent that patient should come in, just really respecting the doctor-patient relationship.
So far, only a few dozen doctors in the state are approved to recommend medical marijuana to patients.
We as a board recognize its importance, and we really want to make sure that we're following the Louisiana law and making every option available to patients across the state.
Tiffany Wong, Fox 8 News.
Unbelievable that they tried to restrict even further this particular plant and this medicine with legalization. I mean, how about they try this little? A doctor can only prescribe to 100 patients opioids, and maybe that'll cut back on people dying. No one's dying from cannabis. Unbelievable. All right, so cannabis is getting more in the mainstream. We know that, and it's up to people in the mainstream to let other people know who are against it what it's all about. So here is a former NBA player. His name is Matt Barnes, and he said he smoked cannabis before every game, and this is going to help. People like this are going to help the stigma disappear. Here's NBA player Matt Barnes.
How much does the NBA want you to talk about this
I'm
stuff?
I'm not sure. I think Adam Silver is very with it, so to speak. And, he obviously says there's rules and regulations right now, but he's open for conversation down the road. So I think the fact that he's willing to even listen is a big step.
Well, what would do you want no rules and regulations about this?
I think obviously you always want to have rules and regulations. I just think that with more education behind cannabis, they'll understand the benefits. I think everyone's stuck in the old stigma and stereotypes of back in the day that it's, a gateway drug and it's bad for this and it's bad for that. But, knowing what it did for me throughout my career, even throughout my college career and high school career, I'm glad that there's medical research backing that up now because I know what it did for me personally.
What did it do for you personally?
It relaxed me. It was something that allowed me to sleep easier. It was something that took pain away because I'm not really big on alcohol or painkillers, and it was something that just put me in a different area where I was able to relax and be at peace for a small part of my day.
Well, I know for NFL players that it would be something for pain relief, certainly after a career, but during the playing career. But we all know that even Howie Long, Pro Football Hall of Famer, has come on this show and called every snap in the NFL a car crash. I mean, how physical is the NBA to the point where you need marijuana as pain management?
The NBA is physical from the standpoint of, we don't have pads on, so that ground is unforgiving. That court is going to win every single time you hit it. But then from, surgeries, botched surgeries, ankle injuries, broken fingers, things here and there that, a trainer will just throw any kind of painkiller at you for, which makes you feel bad. Painkillers always made me really nauseous. That's why I was never really a fan of them. And at the same time that they're destroying the insides. So, I just realized that even though it was illegal, I found a way to be able to manage it responsibly and use it, and it was my substitution for painkillers.
I got to ask the question, did you ever play a game high?
I smoked before games. It was never right before. What I would do is I'd go to shoot around. I'd come home after shoot around, smoke a joint, take a nap, take a shower, and then go to the game.
And you were able to function?
Yeah, I did it my whole career.
Your whole career?
My whole career.
Did you ever test?
I did. I failed 2 tests, but I just kind of found out, trial and error. I realized, like I said, I wasn't doing it like I would do in the summertime. I was doing it much more responsibly and as needed. But I just found out if I drank a lot of water and ate clean, that I was able to, get it out of my system in time.
And do you think you would have been able to make it through 14 seasons in the NBA without that regimen?
No. Not only from the pain standpoint, but just, my life has been well documented, the crazy stuff on and off the court, and to be able to to be able to focus, because we don't get a break. Once that ball goes up, no matter if I went through a divorce or my mom died or I got in a fight with someone, with the world talking about it during those 2 hours, there's no excuses. And I think it allowed me to focus and handle my business when I needed to.
Now, at a concert, I always say this too, or at a sporting event, I'll be honest, I'd rather be behind somebody smoking than somebody drinking.
Oh, yeah.
Without a doubt.
There's no question.
Because there's usually no fights when somebody is smoking rather than drinking. Anything can go crazy.
Right.
That said, though, I mean, the stuff that you said documented that's been crazy in your life, could you attribute any of that to it?
I can contribute to me being able to put the fire out, so to speak, by smoking. Like I said, it was, I was painted, and I earned some of it, but just as the bad guy, you know what I mean? Which was, reputation is earned, whether good or bad. So just to be able to kind of block out all the negative that I always got from life, from the game in general, like I said, it just allowed me to focus and calm down and think clearly.
That was NBA player Matt Barnes on the Rich Eisen show, by the way, and coming clean, and letting people know that you can function and use cannabis at the same time. Of course, with legalization in the states that we have here, and Canada's got legalization, there's no place to smoke. And so they're fighting the same thing in Canada as we're doing here. Cannabis lounges are the answer to the consumption conundrum. So here's this report out of Canada. We need to watch what's going on everywhere.
In the news now, the city is putting away plans for pot consumption parks in Calgary. The bylaws allowing for people to smoke marijuana in public were put on hold after overwhelming concern from a lot of people. Doug Basin is live from one of the locations that had been proposed in Bridgeland. Good morning, Doug. What are the next steps now, Doug?
Well, it's an interesting question, Dallas, and we'll have to wait and see what council will do with this. But certainly there are stringent criteria that the city was using to go and okay approved or possibly find these sites. But since there's so much backlash, we'll have to wait and see. We do know that this idea of exempting a public place for consumption is still on the books. It's just there's no way there'd be enough time to find a new site before October 17th when cannabis is legalized by the federal government. Back to you.
So where it all started, at least in this century or the last century, it was Amsterdam. Okay, that's where the coffee shop started. That's where the whole lounge thing. It's part of the cannabis culture is to just like it is for drinking. I mean, people like to go to bars and drink, and people like to go to a coffee shop or a safe place to ingest cannabis. So it all started in Amsterdam, and now here's a report on why Amsterdam is jealous of America's growing cannabis industry.
We are in Amsterdam. This is a city that's known for a lot of things, not least among them marijuana. Now, as the cannabis industry is growing in other parts of the world, we thought we could learn some lessons from the industry here.
There's a lot of things going on in this coffee shop. We have a really nice bar.
Joachim Helms is the co-owner of Greenhouse Coffee Shops in Amsterdam and chairman of the Dutch Cannabis Retailers Association.
We have this system in Holland where people can go to a coffee shop and buy their cannabis product in a good, nice, safe environment.
Thanks to a so-called toleration policy, it's been legal to sell and smoke marijuana and hash in coffee shops like Greenhouse in the Netherlands for decades.
So this is one strain that we have. It's a super lemon haze.
Yeah, that's really strong smell.
Yeah. We have a maximum of 500 grams in the coffee shop, and also the people are allowed to buy 5 grams per day per person, so which is enough for personal use.
And that's a small amount compared to in the United States, for example.
In the United States, it's a lot more. Yes, definitely.
The Dutch government enforces strict conditions for coffee shops to stay in business, like the quantity of weed sold and the prohibition of alcohol and other hard drugs. But as marijuana legalization gains steam in countries like the US and Canada, the Netherlands is falling behind when it comes to regulating the weed industry. While it's legal to sell marijuana to customers in coffee shops, it's illegal for the shops to buy their supply of weed.
The politicians, they forgot to organize one aspect of it all, that's that we buy the weed in a normal way. So in Holland, it's illegal to buy weed on a large scale, and it's illegal to produce cannabis also. In America, what you see is a little bit the opposite side. So what they have organized really well is the production of weed.
The Dutch government is planning a trial to experiment with legal production in the country. But that's just one of many regulatory hurdles in the Dutch cannabis industry. A law in 2014 forced coffee shops located within 250 meters of a school to close. That affected 1/3 of Amsterdam shops. Helms said marijuana legalization in Canada and states in the U.S. has started a conversation about how the Netherlands can cash in on the growing legal weed market, which is expected to reach more than $140 billion by 2025. He pointed to Canadian public cannabis companies now valued at billions of dollars.
Do you think it could ever happen here where there was a big publicly traded cannabis company?
I think it will be a while, but I think in the end it will happen worldwide. What you see now is that really big companies are being created producing cannabis. To walk around in those companies and facilities is for us really a dream come true because it's growing weed in a 100% legal way.
And that's Amsterdam. I went to Amsterdam my first and only time 9 years ago in 2009, and you know, I had a great time. The cannabis was actually very good. I didn't really try any hash there. The lounges were fabulous, and we need to have something like that here for sure, so where people can get together. Again, it's part of our culture to share. Okay. Now, everybody's obviously worried about, you know, big canna, big pharma, big farms coming in and so forth. And we're going back to California right now. Small craft pot farmers are excited for regional cannabis appellations. This is like the wine industry. So here's this report, and I really hope and believe that, you know, small craft boutique cannabis will be around even when the big guys take over, because we're going to want the good stuff for recreational and for medical as well. All right, so here's this report out of Northern Cal.
Well, these days you might take for granted that a Napa wine actually comes from the Napa Valley, but not that long ago, California wine was something of a turf war.
Why would anyone even bother to fight over some writing on a bottle of wine? Well, a wine label is supposed to guarantee the quality and character of the grapes. And to a winemaker, that translates to a bottom line of dollars and cents.
Yeah, remember that? Now it is state law. A bottle of wine that says Napa must actually be made from grapes that were grown in one of the 16 Napa wine regions, or appellations. So just like a Bordeaux must come from one of the 54 wine appellations in Bordeaux, France.
Well, our other state's other famous crop is about to get some designated appellations of its own. And as Wilson Walker shows us, California's small cannabis farmers are absolutely thrilled.
Every zone has its different microclimates. I mean, the sun is really like just hits us in the summertime here.
With the help of the intense Mendocino sun, they grow a little bit of everything here at Moongazer Farms.
Supposed to be a butternut, but I don't know.
More importantly, they grow all of this the right way.
In full sun, outdoors.
We take pride in not needing to use any pesticides.
And that, of course, includes the farm's signature crop.
We love just kind of diverse cannabinoid profiles in our cannabis plants.
Josh and Sandra have actually won awards for their regenerative cannabis farming, giving back to the land using minimal water, building healthy soil.
That's what we say. We grow soil, and the soil grows the plants.
Well, in the coming years, California is going to give cannabis like this a label that tells its story, how it was grown and where it comes from.
That's why grapes are known for their appellation, because they have the terroir. Literally is the soil, it's the ground, the earth.
So as the nearby wine country would produce a Cabernet grown by Borelli Creek Vineyards in the Alexander Valley region of Sonoma County, Sandra and Josh would give us
Red Rosebud, grown by Moongazer Farms in the Redwood Valley appellation of Mendocino County.
Well, and it's renowned around the world, so the lift in that respect is easy.
Jeannie Coleman heads the Mendocino Appellations Project. She has developed this map of the county's specific cannabis growing regions.
Because it's a way that we can protect our heritage and our region and our scale.
The state is now holding forums, getting input as to what the official California cannabis appellation map might look like. There would also be a set of standards and practices required to earn the label, and small craft growers are hoping that that type of distinction can help preserve their trade in the years ahead.
Right, there's a certain love to plant ratio that's possible with craft cannabis that's not necessarily possible on a commodity scale production, right?
We have heard a lot of doom and gloom from small farmers during the first 8 months of legalized cannabis in California, but this This is something else, an opportunity to turn this region's legacy and reputation into a valuable selling point that can hopefully make this all work.
Yeah, we have this opportunity to support these small farmers growing in this way.
All of us here are like fighting with all of our souls to make sure that we can keep this craft.
In Mendocino County, Wilson Walker, KPIX 5.
I'm very excited about that. It's going to be great to have boutique cannabis, craft cannabis, grown well, no pesticides, and you can grow with no pesticides if you keep that plant healthy. All right, before we take a quick break and come back with author, High Times senior grow editor Danny Danko. Have you ever smoked lobster? No, I don't mean eating smoked lobster. People do smoke that. A Maine restaurant in Maine, here in the United States, is going to be sedating their lobsters with marijuana before cooking them. Here's this.
Charlotte Gill, the owner of Charlotte's legendary Lobster Pound, tells the Mountain Desert Islander, if we are going to take a life, we have to do it humanely as possible, and that lobster meat tastes better if the animal is less stressed before dying. Gill says she sedated her first lobster, Roscoe, she named him, by placing him in a covered box with some water at the bottom and blowing marijuana smoke into the water. She says Roscoe became calmer, not using his claws as weapons. He was released into the ocean as a reward for being the first in the experiment. Right now, customers have to request that their lobster get the stoner sedation, but Charlotte says she hopes to soon sedate all lobsters before cooking them. Matt Urs for WBZ News.
The studies on lobsters being sedated by cannabis are not in yet, so we'll have to watch. Okay, we'll be right back with Danny Danko after this short little break.
It's all about the 420 MMJ Radio. The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana radio show.
And we're back. And online today, I'm really happy to have Danny Danko. Danny Danko is the senior cultivation editor of High Times magazine, and he has a new book out, Cannabis, A Beginner's Guide to Growing. And I think, oh, by the way, and the foreword is by Jorge Cervantes. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you for having me.
So I know you're fresh back from the Boston Freedom Rally and all this, and it's very exciting to have your book come out now. So tell me a little bit about why A Beginner's Guide. You've had some a great book on strains in the past, a strain guide that was fantastic with great pictures. Tell me about this publication.
Yeah, well, I feel like there's going to be a lot of people interested in growing and not really knowing where to begin. And there's a lot of information online. There's a lot of textbooks out there that are very complicated, but I hadn't seen something very basic and entry level, just to basically get across the point of how plants grow and how, the life cycle of cannabis and how to get started so that, rather than mass producing it in a big, warehouse or factory, you could just have a small tent, or a closet or a grow box and create enough cannabis for yourself that you would never have to purchase it. So, yeah, it was basically, all these laws are changing, particularly in North America and Canada and various states, to allow for people to grow a certain amount of plants, 6 plants here or 4 plants there or 12 plants. And so there's a limit on the amount of plants, but not the size of those plants. So I just wanted to, get people started and interested in maybe, the hobby of growing their own.
Absolutely, and I think it's great. Let me ask you, so that being said, you're talking about first-time growers. They've never grown a cannabis plant before. Would you advise maybe growing one or two plants outdoors if you have a safe place to do that? Or if you're indoors in a grow tent you just mentioned, would you say maybe try one plant just to watch what everything is like and go through it once? Because it can get, pretty crazy, with more than a couple of plants.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always best to start with just a few plants, one or a small number of plants, and just learn the basic growth cycles, how to, when to add water and nutrients and when to just stay out of the way and let the plant do its thing. So, certainly wouldn't want to have people experimenting with expensive, $100 seeds and things like that. So, it's always good to get started and get an understanding of how the plant grows before, diving a little bit deeper and having like a full grow space.
So speaking of seeds, how do you feel about feminized seeds? For instance, some of these seed companies, at least a local one here, they'll sell you 4 feminized seeds for like $25, or you can get 8 regular non-feminized seeds. Which way would you personally go?
Well, it's, everything has its place. So feminized seeds are there because, people don't want to waste their time growing male plants. They want to be sure that any seed that they plant is going to grow out as a female. So it's a matter of convenience for some people to grow feminized seeds, particularly when they don't plan on doing any breeding or any cloning. So if you're just growing from seed and then, you plan to buy more seeds and grow from those, feminized seeds make perfect sense for that purpose. But if you're actually going to grow out a mother plant, make clones from it, or if you're looking for something new genetically that won't occur in the feminization process but will occur when you cross males and females, then in that case you'd want to go with regular seeds. But there's auto-flowering seeds and feminized seeds and all kinds of different options out there for people, and they're all described in the book as well. And again, auto-flowering may not be for everyone, but if you live in a place, with short seasons or at a high altitude, then they're a necessity. So it's really a matter of your particular situation and what you're growing for.
Absolutely. Yes, I totally agree with you. I've been around this for a while, so I grew my first plant probably in about 1970, I would say. And so, it's a lot has changed since then. We didn't even know really when to harvest them. Back then, the rule of thumb was when the white hairs were like halfway down red or brown, you would cut your plant down. And now with, just everything that's going on with microscopes and the trichomes, it's just a more scientific way of growing. So for the first timer, let me ask you about what medium you think would be the easiest. Soil, cocoa, what kind of, for first timers, because one can be easier than others.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good light, airy potting soil is probably the best for beginners because it's the most forgiving. It contains some nutrients and holds the roots well. But, if you're going to get interested in, hydroponics and things like that, those are more advanced techniques that, you may need to practice with soil first. It's more forgiving. You have more time to sort of fix a mistake. And it's kind of like it's a little bit of a slower process, but at the same time, it's sort of buffered. So you're less likely to have a catastrophe when you're growing in just a nice, light, airy, soilless mix.
And speaking of catastrophes, one of the hardest problems, especially indoors, are like, mites and little predators and so forth. So what can be used now to keep that from happening? Number one, I know if you keep your plant happy, that bugs don't tend to want to go there. And what can be used that's acceptable these days?
Well, certainly, as you mentioned, prevention is the most important thing when it comes to pests and disease. So keeping your plants clean of, and dyeing leaves is important. Keeping the floor clean of leaves and puddles of water and things like that are invitations for pests to come and attack your plants. So prevention is very important. Just basically taking a look at the underside of the leaves, at the surface of your soil, at every plant, because any infestation will start in the back corner where you're not necessarily paying the closest amount of attention. So prevention is important. And then if you do have the signs of an infestation, you need to act quickly. And, of course, I always recommend organic, pest techniques, including beneficial insects and nematodes, which actually are like predators that, they're basically carnivores that kill the vegetarians that are eating your plants. And that's a biological solution that people can use. There's also, obviously, insecticidal soaps and different organic options, neem oil, and other things that can be implemented. But really, it's about integrated pest management, which means you do prevention, and then once you have an infestation, or even the beginnings of an infestation, you act in ways to mitigate that and to control the population, and hopefully to get rid of it entirely if you can. It really depends on the bug. In some cases, I recommend people to just shut down, kill everything, and start over, because they've let it go too far.
I'm glad you said that, because somebody in Northern California once told me that you're not a real grower until you can kill a plant or two. I thought it was
there's definitely a lot of you got to definitely get used to killing plants when you're growing plants, for sure.
So we're talking with Danny Danko, and Danny is the senior grow editor from High Times magazine. Are you going to graduate soon to a higher from being a senior for a long time? And the book
I'm always learning. There's always more to learn.
Isn't that the greatest part about what's happening with our industry right now, is that we're learning all the time? And so your book is available on Amazon and with Kindle and with is it hardback and softback or
I think it's just a paperback at the moment, and Kindle as well on Amazon.
And if somebody wants a autograph copy, do you have a site where people can order autograph copies?
I do. I sell them on eBay. So if people just search, Danny Danko or Beginner Marijuana Grow Guide or any of that stuff, I sell them on eBay. They just have to put in the note with the sale, their name, or if they want it inscribed.
Right. Okay. Great. And so I think the Kindle edition is $9.99. I'm just looking on, seeing what the softback is. Do you know what it is off the top of your head there?
I believe it's $14.95 for the soft cover.
Yes, it is. It's $14.95, and it is on Prime. So if you're a Prime Amazon, you'll get that with no shipping. So let me ask you a couple things. You've been around this industry for a long time. I find that with legalization for adult use and medical, more medical states coming on, it seems to be getting more restrictive. And I know, the cups now that High Times has, there's more of them and so forth. So how do you think they've changed over the years from, when it was sort of an underground thing to being out in the open?
Well, you're right. I mean, certainly there's more regulation. To me, that's not necessarily always a bad thing. Obviously, over-regulation is a problem, but regulation is something that, every industry has. And I think, self-regulation is probably the best form of it in the case of, emergency rooms are basically regulated by emergency room doctors. And that's why, they have, they're such safe places and good places, because the doctors themselves are regulating it. And I think our industry, as it emerges, needs to regulate itself before, facing this over-regulation from the government. Another thing is, the regulation is the price we pay for not going to jail. So,
right.
There's been all of these injustices that have come on the basis of marijuana prohibition. There's still plenty of people in jail now for nonviolent marijuana offenses. So, if we can avoid that and stop that from happening, that's a great thing. And if that means, dealing with, the growing pains of an emerging industry, then, that's what we have to deal with. And people forget that, part of the Wild West and part of living in the underground means, losing, members of your family, losing, the access to, hugging your children, and all of these really, fundamental basic rights that we have are lost. So, let's not lose sight of the fact that, with legalization comes, less injustice.
Yeah, it's taken a long time to get to where we are today, and it's really accelerated really fast over the last few years. I am, very surprised that things are moving so fast. And that being said, I believe sometime, possibly even this weekend, before we do this show, there could be an announcement, from the DEA or Congress or whatever about descheduling. The hemp bill has been passed, I believe, by Mitch McConnell, and they have to change things in order to proliferate that. And there's some bad wording in that hemp bill where people with records can't get involved. These are the some experts that have been working with hemp for years and years, and there's some bad language in there. So a lot of people, with, like what you said, feel that this has been going on for a long time. Nobody should be in jail, and so they're accepting of anything that will pass to make it better. But we really have to watch what they put in some of these bills for sure. I'm sure you agree to that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we want to be able to grow our own. That, home grow is very important to me personally, to High Times as an entity, because, everyone's afraid of these corporate, the corporate takeover of cannabis as it becomes more legal. You have, Monsanto and Marlboro and all these big companies, dipping their toe. Even we just recently heard about Coca-Cola, looking to make a,
right,
marijuana-infused sodas. So all of this is happening. There's nothing we can do to stop it. But what we can do is we can grow our own. So you don't necessarily have to buy your cannabis from Marlboro, nor do I plan to do that. You know what I mean? So as long as we have the right to grow our own, then we can stay outside of that system if we so choose. Now, if you want to buy, 10, packs of joints from, Monsanto, you can do so, because they're going to be part of the industry, and they're coming. But if you want to get it from a mom and pop grow up, or a small, co-op of farmers who are growing organically and using, light feeding techniques and growing craft quality, small batch cannabis, then, you're going to get a great product, and you're not going to have to really worry about this whole corporate,
right,
takeover.
Well,
so,
it's obvious
there's certain things I want to see within the laws, but again, these are baby steps as well, and laws need to get passed, and then they can be changed. But the most important thing is keeping people out of prison, being able to grow our own, and also I think in the future having places where we can go, social use, places we can consume cannabis, with like-minded individuals and participate in the way that people who drink or smoke cigars or whatever else do.
Well, a big part of cannabis is the sharing part of it. I was able to get to Amsterdam once back in 2009, so it was still kind of new to me. Even though when I came back here and saw some of the California dispensaries and so forth, they sort of blew that out of the water because there was a lot of restrictions in Amsterdam. But consumption lounges, social clubs, and so forth definitely is the way to go. It would be my dream to own one someday, and it would just be fabulous. And the laws will change, and like I said, it's getting going fast. It's speeding up, but we just have to watch the language, because right now what's happening is a lot of medical programs are suffering in states where the legalization for adult use has gone on. So I think it's really important to separate the two industries. They're two different industries, and if we don't do it state by state, then Big Pharma will come in and grab the medical industry, and I don't think they necessarily have to. Here in New Mexico, we might, if we get a new governor, we might go for rec in 2019, or the Democrat at least wants to do it. But we have to protect the medical industries. Again, they're different. I don't think a patient who wants some Rick Simpson type oil, some strong canna caps, should walk into a recreational store, or that's both. There's different things that are needed. So I'm hoping that language will start to proliferate to other states and protect medical. How do you see that? Do you feel that there should be one or the other as far as a business going into either being medical or recreational?
Well, I think, Colorado obviously did a better job of that than Washington State, for instance. In Colorado, you can buy medical, which is a cheaper product because there's also less taxes, obviously, on that product. So if you can prove in Colorado that you're a medical patient, you can get medicine at a reduced price. And, in places like Washington, they dismantled some of the medical marijuana system. I mean, I'm still happy that, recreational has passed, but I do think that, we need to protect patients. I always liked, the idea that, medical marijuana was getting the wounded off of the battlefield in the war on drugs. You get the wounded off the battlefield, but the fight goes on.
Right.
And I don't necessarily, me personally, I don't need a doctor's permission to use cannabis. I don't think, necessarily need it. I think, most people, if not all people, are using it medicinally, whether they know it or not, in varying degrees, because it heals body and mind. So,
I totally agree.
It's definitely a complicated issue. I support the rights of patients, but I also resent the fact that some patients turn around and say, well, I'm a patient, I'm not a criminal. And they turn their back on, cannabis users, adult users who don't necessarily go and get their medical card, because honestly, that's a box canyon, and you can end up with something that doesn't resemble freedom. Yes. And I think, cannabis freedom is what I'm after. And whether that means, obviously that means freedom for medical patients, but it also just means freedom for adults to use cannabis and grow it and consume it and share it without having, to go and get their doctor's permission.
Totally, but there are really sick people. I managed a dispensary for 2 years, and I dealt with the people coming in. So there's just so many legitimate patients out there that need a different kind of counseling. I had to counsel a 90-year-old woman who never had cannabis in her life. If you don't get them started in the right way the first time, they'll never go back to it and use this great medicine. All right, before I let you go, I've always wanted to ask this question, which is about judging cannabis and extracts and edibles and so forth at an event. Can you just give me a little rundown about how that happens? And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I've been smoking 50 years this year. I don't know that I could test, more than one strain in a day. So how does that work? I'm sure you've been a judge, and I know that you've run the events. So tell me just a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously in one day it is very difficult to do that sort of thing. With our Cannabis Cup events, with High Times events, we typically have a week or more to do the judging. So you have a number of days, and you can narrow down, to your favorites, and then you can continue to retest them. And basically, it isn't just about potency. We have labs that do the testing, and 30% of the score is determined by the lab. So the potency level is handled somewhat by the lab, and for the individual, it's obviously potency plays a major role, but it's also about the burnability. It's about the smell, the taste, the whole experience entirely of consuming that cannabis. So, like I said, we have enough time to go back and revisit your favorites. A lot of times you'll have the same strain entered multiple times in the same category, and then in that case, you're not just judging that particular strain, but you're judging that particular grower, and whether they fed that plant properly, whether they flushed that plant properly, whether it was been cured properly, because obviously a lot of mistakes happen after the growing is finished in the processing, in the process there of drying and curing. So all those factors come into play. And, you know, once you've done it a few times, it becomes a little easier, of course. And again, you know, for potency, you're going to want to go back and revisit your top, you know, 10 or your top 5 or whatever that might be, with more of a clear head. So, you know, in the morning, the next day, you can go and revisit something and say, hey, you know, this one cut through the fog. Let's find out if you know, if this really has what it takes. And the cream really does rise to the top. You find out pretty quickly that like-minded judges, you know, pretty much come up with the same top 5 to 10 over and over again, and then it's just a matter of, you know, the lab results and sort of narrowing down process. But I've done it more than anybody on earth, I believe, and it's been an interesting process, and you know, I tell people it's it's a job, you know. People say, it's fun. It's, you know, it takes all day for a long period of time.
So that being said, do you have a holy grail of a strain cultivar that you know is your favorite?
Well, you know, I have some that, you know, I've grown in the past, like strawberry cough, that I love to smoke and I love to grow. But then, you know, when it comes to competitions, it's usually, you know, in the indica category, you're typically going to have something really fuel-oriented, like a diesel kush or a chem dog, you know, something from that sort of family of strains. And then in the sativa category, you know, you're going to get like something from the haze family, like Jack Herer, Blue Dream, you know, strawberry cough, those types of, you know, the lemon haze is very popular in that category. Tangy in the last, you know, 5 years or so has really sort of dominated the sativa category. And then hybrids, you know, a mix of a little bit of both. And you see a lot of the newer up-and-coming strains, you know, the Girl Scout cookies, the Do-Si-Do, the Skittles, and strains like that.
Do you have
up in that category?
Do you have a land race holy grail that you would love to see come back? You know, mine is Santa Marta Gold from Colombia, which was like circa 1971, 72. I don't know how old you are, but do you have like a land race holy grail?
Yeah, I mean, personally, for me, I really love African sativas. I love the Durban Poison, the Nigerian silk that we have sometimes here in New York. They're not the easiest to grow. They're, you know, wispy, and they have long flowering times, and they're very sort of finicky when it comes to nutrients. But when they're grown properly, and they're really electric. They have this quality that just
sort of like the Thai.
It can almost cause panic attacks.
Yes.
Like Thai.
Yes, I agree.
The Southeast Asian strains as well have that quality that is really just very uplifting, very energetic, and you know, creative. I think, you know, as I get older, I think I appreciate those strains more because they just, you know, they're perfect for motivation.
Absolutely, I missed that as well. One more question: have you ever had Frenchie Cannoli's hash?
I have, indeed, and yeah, I'm a big fan. I just saw him at Boston Freedom Rally, and he's been making the rounds at all the events, teaching people the sort of natural terroir effect of the old school hash making processes, but sort of cleaning up those processes, so you're getting less, you know, dust and goat poop, and more of just the pure oil, you know, the trichomes, the essential oil of cannabis, but also the terroir of where it was grown. And I think it's very interesting what he's been able to accomplish with, you know, bringing back that art of hash making.
Well, I'm hoping to get to California in the next few months because I think some of his stuff at least was at Buds and Roses in Studio City for a while. I hope it's still there. I need to definitely check out Frenchie's stuff. Anyway, we're talking to Danny Danko, his book Cannabis, A Beginner's Guide to Growing Marijuana. If you are just starting and you're in a state that just became legal, medical, or adult use, this is definitely where to start. Danny, thank you so much for spending time today, and good luck and safe travels.
Thanks for having me, and yeah, thanks again.
My pleasure. We'll be right back after this.
a ganja planter. Call me the ganja farmer. Deep down into the earth when me put the ganja. Babylon come me light it up on fire, me chance. Yes, I'm a ganja planter. Call me the ganja farmer. Deep down into the earth when me put the ganja. Babylon come me light it up on fire. Big stinking helicopter blow to the air. What them call it weed. Them never did that when me not out in water. Or when me did they flying fertilizer. Yeah, out in the sky them spitting fire. And I'm a little youth man with that hot temper. Me dig out me stinking rocky lantern. And in all the air they spent helicopter. Me turn, yeah. I'm a ganja planter. Call me the ganja farmer. Deep down into the earth when me put the ganja. Babylon come me light it up on fire, me turn. Yes, I'm a ganja planter. Call me the ganja farmer. Deep down into the earth when me put the ganja. Babylon come me light it up on fire. Choose Jaja bless, I will not for good boys, man. To room me at the others with the ganja paniland. Make doctors kidnap medication. I saw them could give it to them situation. Make chemists kidnap medication. I saw them could brew new medication. Make singers get some inspiration. I saw them could spread your message panel and me chances. Yes, I'm a ganja planter. Call me the ganja farmer. Deep down into the earth when me put the ganja. Babylon come me light it up on fire, me chant. Yes, I'm a ganja planter. Call me the ganja farmer. Deep down into the earth when me put the ganja. Babylon come me light it up on fire. And me na ganja. If you don't want to call it that, call it sensimania. If you don't want to call it that, call it marijuana. If you don't want to call it that, call it that indie. Coffee come me born it in the chalice, mash it in the paper. Lord, that's how me love me ganja. Yes, I'm a ganja planter. Call me the ganja farmer. Deep down into the earth when we put the ganja. Babylon come me light it up on fire, me chant. Yes, I'm a ganja planter. Call me the ganja farmer. Deep down into the earth when we put the ganja. Babylon come me light it up on fire. And me na ganja. If you don't want to call it that, call it sensimania. If you don't want to call it that, call it marijuana. If you don't want to call it that, call it that indie. Coffee come me born it in the chalice, mash it in the paper. Lord, that's how me love me ganja. Yes, I'm a ganja planter. Call me the ganja farmer. Deep down into the earth when we put the ganja. Babylon come me light it up on fire, me chant. Yes, I'm a ganja planter. Call me the ganja farmer. Deep down into the earth when we put the ganja. Babylon come me light it up on fire, yeah. The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show.
Well, I want to thank Danny Danko. Check out his book on Amazon, or if you want to get a signed copy, it's on eBay, $14.95 for the paperback, and Kindle is, I think, $9.95. Thanks, Danny. I also want to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. If you have a story to tell, you're a patient, you have a product to sell, info@MMJRadio.com. Again, info@MMJRadio.com. We'd love to have you on the show. If you want to hear some of our old shows, you can go to Medical Marijuana Radio. We've been doing this for 9 years now. So go to medicalmarijuanaradio.com or MMJRadio.com. My YouTube channel is LSLove88. On SoundCloud, we're MMJ Radio, as well as Spreaker. Also on CannabisTube.net. Also on Spreaker and iHeartRadio. We're on the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. On NowTV.com, channel 937. And coming soon, theCannaChannel.com.
The magical marijuana.
Chaos refuses.
Shalom.
Oh yeah, and fuck Trump.
Hey.